Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. Today I want to talk to you about my kind of reading list for autumn and a few things I've bought myself to get into the cosy spirit, which I am already in, to be honest. The black lipstick is out, I've got pumpkin spice tea, and I'm ready. In fact, I woke up on September 1st and just was like, oh, it's autumn. Even though York is actually kind of still quite warm and it's not autumnal really at all, but in my heart it is, and in my heart the leaves of my heart are turning, if not the ones outside. If you haven't already, please pause this video and go and get yourself a hot mug of something, because I feel like you can't be fully relaxed without a hot drink in your hand. And also this mug has got Whitby Abbey on. It's hand painted and handmade in Whitby and I love it. It's now one of my favourite mugs. It's also actually on the inside, this tea is really hot, so I'm going to have to put it down. Oh, this could end very badly. On the back it's also got a seagull, and what I love about this mug is that on the day I bought it, when Ben and I went to Whitby, Ben later got hit in the head by a seagull, so it just captures both of those important moments in our life together. Ben getting attacked and me seeing Whitby Abbey again. This video really is a transitional one in a way, because it kind of shows what I'm thinking about reading this autumn and as the seasons kind of change. And as the seasons change, I tend to get into a little bit more kind of gothic and just cosy books in general, which will definitely kind of be evident. So I'll start off with the books, but then I've got a few extra things to show you as well. The first book that I want to read this autumn is a reread for me, and it is Jonathan Strange and Mr Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is one of the best books you will ever read if you haven't read it yet. It's perfect for autumn and winter. It's an alternate history, obviously full of magic in a world where magic and magicians are still very much kind of alive. It also begins in York, and is one of my favourite scenes is when they go to York Minster and make the statues come alive. And so I knew I wanted to read it, and when I'd moved back to York, and now I'm here, it's kind of perfect. Even though the novel itself goes to London and it really kind of travels across the kind of Europe really, but for me there is something so beautiful about the beginning in York. Some years ago there was in the city of York a society of magicians. It is set in the early 19th century, and it really is, I think one of the descriptions has been that if it's kind of like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, if they were to write a fantasy novel, and that is exactly how I feel about this book. It is massive, and I've said it before, this is one of those books that is so worth your time, and it is one of those books that even though it's long, you'll get to the end and you'll be like, it's not long enough, you need more. And part of me has always hoped there would be some kind of sequel or a next novel, but even if there isn't, it's still one of the best books I've written. There is one really small passage that I always read to people to try and get them to convince them to read it. So I'll just quickly read it to you once I found it. Here it is. It has been remarked by a lady infinitely cleverer than the present author how kindly disposed the world in general feels to young people who either die or marry. Imagine then the interest that surrounded Miss Wintertown. No young lady ever had such advantages before, for she died upon the Tuesday, was raised to life in the early hours of Wednesday morning, and was married upon the Thursday, which some people thought too much excitement for 1 week. I mean, if that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. The novel is really inspired by 18th century literary culture and just culture in general, and there are footnotes throughout the entire book that can be pages long, and they just really add to the magic of it for me. Another one of my favourite things about Jonathan Strange Mr Norrell is the illustrations that run throughout, which again feels very 18th century but also quite Dickens as well. But it's just a book that is so full of magic in many, many ways. And this edition is a beautiful hardback one for the 20th anniversary of the novel being published. And so I always wanted a hardback of it, and I really would love to get the folio editions of it. That was a bit more expensive, so I went for this really beautiful new hardback. Autumn and winter is just the perfect time to read this novel, so if you haven't picked it up and you've been daunted potentially by how big it is, let this video be the reason that you pick it up. And if you do pick it up, please let me know, because I'd love to hear if you love it as much as I do. The next book on my autumn TBR is the book that I'm just about to start reading. I'm literally going to start it as soon as I turn off this camera, and it is Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood. Lucy Jane Wood's YouTube channel has been one of the great sources of comfort for me for years, and I love her videos so much, and I'm really excited to read this. It's her debut cozy fantasy novel for fans of Gilmore Girls. It is set or partly in a London bookshop, which is just kind of a tick for me. The title as well I love, because one of my favourite TV shows that I watched so much growing up was Bewitched, and this is about a witch turning 30, kind of rediscovering her magic. I guess I'm now also in my 30th year, so I feel like I might relate to this, but I am excited just to kind of cozy up with this book, which is exactly what I intend to do today. And also Lucy Jane Wood is literally the reason that I started to watch the Gilmore Girls in the first place, and so I feel like in fact her entire channel for me has always had a really cozy vibe to it, and so I just know that it's going to be the same, and I've already heard lots of lovely things about it, so I'm excited to read this. Autumn, of course, not only the season of The Witch, but also the season of Victober, which is one of my favourite kind of events on BookTube every year that I love taking part in, even if it's just from the sidelines. And so of course I have a bit of Victorian literature to add to my autumnal TBR this year. Now I'm back in Yorkshire, of course I have to pick up a Brontë novel as a part of Victober, and I think I actually will pick up The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Brontë, because this has been a book that I've meant to kind of read or reread really in Victober, I think every year, and never have done it. I don't know why. Brontë is the one Brontë that I don't love yet, but I feel like I have great capacity to love Brontë, and I do want to go to the Brontë parsonage in Howard again now I'm in Yorkshire, and also go to Scarborough where Anne is buried, and so I really have a vision for having a bit of an Brontë moment anyway, and doing a bit of kind of literary travel, tourism, but The Tenant of Wildfell Hall fits into kind of several of the prompts really for Victober, but I just really want to read and love Brontë, because I feel like she deserves it. I feel like she's definitely the lesser known and the slightly forgotten about Bronte's sister, and I feel like I should really love her. The next novel that I've got on my Victober list this year is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is a sensation novel, a great kind of Victorian sensation thriller, and I've always wanted to read it. I do really feel like both of these books actually have been on my Victober TBR every year, and I've never got round to reading them. I definitely feel like I'll be inspired to read a Brontë novel now I'm in Yorkshire, but I still need to read a Wilkie Collins novel. I've never read one before, and The Woman in the White is the book that kind of stands out to me most in terms of the things I would like to read about. But if you have any other recommendations for Wilkie Collins, please let me know, or if you think this is the right place to start with his writing, because I know he does a lot of ghost stories as well, which might be a good introduction first, but I do quite like a big novel, as you've seen from Jonathan's Strange Mr Norrell. Of course, I wouldn't dare enter spooky season without an Agatha Christie novel in hand, and I've picked Crooked House. I don't know Agatha Christie well enough to know which books are the best ones to read for each season, so let me know if there is a recommendation that you have for autumn. Last Halloween I read Halloween Party, but oh my goodness, it was one of the worst books I've ever read. I just kind of ended the novel being like, what the fuck happened? Like, what is this? And I have since learned that some of Agatha Christie's later works aren't as good. And I rarely dislike books because I'm really fussy with the books that I read, and so I don't tend to dislike the books that I'm reading, but I've never really wanted to DNF a book before, but Halloween Party really nearly led me there. But yeah, so I picked Crooked House mainly because I have it in this edition, and so I feel like this is quite autumnal, like Halloweeny. But yeah, if there is a better book to read for autumn, please let me know. I completely forgot to mention earlier on in the video that I've also got The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle on my Victober list as well. Last Victober I did read the first kind of 2 Sherlock Holmes stories, and I thought they were awful. Like, I hated them, but I really feel like I would enjoy Sherlock Holmes because I love mystery detective fiction. So I really hope that The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is a lot better, because I just found the other ones too shocking to be able to enjoy. And if you feel like there is a Sherlock Holmes story that I should read, whether it's like, you know, The Hound of the Baskervilles, whether that's just the novel I should read instead of The Adventures, please let me know. Then of course, because it's me, I have a part of historical non-fiction that I'd like to read. The first book is one that I hauled, I think at the beginning of this year potentially, or one of my last kind of London book shopping videos, and it is Judith Flanders' Rites of Passage, Death and Mourning in Victorian Britain. And I've been waiting to keep this for the autumn because I felt like it was the perfect kind of Halloween read. But Judith Flanders is one of my favourite kind of historians on the Victorian era. I just love her writing so much, and she does tend to often look at the darker side of things, which I've always really enjoyed, and I feel like this will be no different. Next I've got The House of Dudley by Joanne, a new history of Tudor England about the rise and fall of the Dudley family. And already I can tell this is going to be one of my favourite history books of the year, just because the writing is so brilliant, and I love how it starts at the beginning of the Tudor era, because I think sometimes when we think of the Tudors it kind of gets stuck on Henry VIII, whereas this really kind of also goes into Henry VII, which has kind of ignited an interest in Henry VII that I didn't necessarily have as much before reading this book, so that's always a lovely thing. What has really struck me so far is the writing in this, like the symbolism, just the choice of words just really hits home with this book. And I actually like dog-eared this little bit just so I could read you this description because I feel like it's perfect. Okay, it's the execution of Edmund Dudley. The executioner accepted Edmund's pardon. The crowd jeered over his speech. He knelt in the blood, barely absorbed by the rushes. It soaked through his hose and stained his skin. He'd investigated every avenue, but there was no way out now. His cheek met the bloody block. It smelled woody and metallic, like a coffer full of coins. That description, it smelled woody and metallic like a coffer full of coins. I was like, for Edmund Dudley, of course, like it smells like a coffer full of coins. I don't know what it was, it just really hit me, and I was there. And sometimes kind of non-fiction books don't really do that, but the writing in this so far has been brilliant. But I am only about 100 pages in or so, but I feel like this is going to be one of my favourite books that I read this year. Now I've got two pieces of historical non-fiction that were sent to me by the publishers, and the first one is Embers of the Hands, Hidden Histories of the Viking Age. This is published by Profile. For those of you who don't know, a few years ago I went to the York Viking Museum in York and became obsessed with Vikings. Like, I read every book I could get my hands on about Vikings. So when I knew that they were releasing a new book about the Vikings, and in particular about the everyday life of the Vikings, I just knew that I would love it. It's also one of the most beautiful books, but I'm really excited because I do feel like our perceptions of the Vikings are, you know, kind of big guys wearing lots of furs, running onto land from the sea, and just very kind of violent histories of the Vikings rather than everyday life, especially with everyday life that we see as evident in the York Viking Museum or from York in terms of how they integrated, especially in the UK. The other element of the Vikings I'm fascinated about is just how international they were, and which I read The River Kings by Kat Yarman, which I would definitely recommend if you're interested in reading books about the Vikings, but in particular just how far they travelled, how much trade there was, and how much influence that had on the culture, the Viking culture, but also in the culture that kind of followed after as well. And so this kind of spans the centuries and also all the continents as well. Next we have another book that looks at everyday life in a later period, much later period, and it is God's Own Gentlewoman, The Life of Margaret Paston by Diane Watt, which was kindly sent to me by Icon. And it looks at the life of Margaret, whose letters form the most extensive kind of evidence that we have of medieval life around the time of the Wars of the Roses, covering topics including political conflicts and familial infighting, forbidden love affairs and clandestine marriages, bloody battles and sieges, fear of plague and sudden death, friendships and animosity, and childbirth and child mortality. Margaret's letters provide us with unparalleled insight into all aspects of life in late medieval England. I think this is going to be brilliant. So there are the books that make up my autumnal reading list at the moment. And then for the last part of the video, I just want to talk to you about smells, about scents. If you've watched my videos for a while, you'll know there are two things that are very important to me. Firstly, tea, which actually I haven't got much to show you, but I definitely will probably do videos about my autumnal teas at some point. But I love candles and I love smelly things. I love cleaning, I love anything. My sense of smell is insane. And so whenever I transition to a new season, along with the books that I read, the other thing that's super important to me is smell. So every year I get really excited for the new kind of seasonal scents that come out, and so I've been shopping and I want to show you my new purchases, but also recommend I think my favourite kind of pumpkin candle. I've probably mentioned this candle in every autumn video for the last 5 years, but it is Cozy Glow's Pumpkin Spice. It is a natural soy candle. I stocked up on these before I left London because they were local to me in South London, and you can totally get them online, but I still think that this is one of the best like pumpkin candles I have ever tried, because it's not too sweet, like it never becomes sickly, which I feel like with pumpkin spice it can lead that way to being a little bit too much, but it is just the loveliest smell. I'm aware that actually talking about scents on camera is a little bit futile because you can't obviously smell them, but I just want to recommend them because I've had many of the things over the years, but this is the one that I have stocked up on purposely because I just love it so much. The next two smelly things are recent purchases for me because I bought them today, so I haven't used them, so I'll come back and let you know what I think. But these are handmade in York. They're from a company called PQ Soy Wax Candles, and I picked up two different types. I picked up Vintage Bookshop and also their Pumpkin Souffle. Of course, a wax melt called Vintage Bookshop for us book lovers is like the perfect kind of scent, but for me this smells like something very specific from my childhood, and it smells like a caravan. Now, I haven't spoken about my love of caravans on my channel before because there hasn't necessarily been need to, but I love caravans. My wealth for me would being able to afford my own caravan one day. That would be, you know, I've hit the jackpot if I own a caravan or a little motorhome. I personally have always preferred caravans, but I grew up spending a lot of time in both. But me and caravans, I have a very big emotional connection to them. When I can't sleep, I put on the sound of a caravan heater or of rain falling on a caravan roof. I'm very emotionally attached to them. And as soon as I smelt this, it just smelled like a caravan to me. And obviously for me, I don't know how else to explain it apart from it smells like a caravan. It smells like home is what it smells like, which is a lovely scent. But it smells warm and welcoming, and it could be a bookshop or it could be a caravan, and that's what it is to me. Next we have Pumpkin Souffle, which also just smells lovely and biscuity but not too sweet. So I'm excited to melt these once it gets a little bit more autumnal than it currently is. For now I'll just be embracing the smells of caravans. These smell so beautiful. Then now my office just smells fantastic. So I'll leave a link to the company below because they're handmade in York, and I always just love finding kind of local people to support, and so it's exciting. So I have my local London one and now we have my local York one. As soon as it hit September I ran to Freckleface, which is another kind of candle shop in York, and they have two shops. They have one on Petergate and also one on the Shambles, and I love the one on the Shambles because the lady who works there most days is the nicest person, and so I always like to go and buy from her. But as soon as they got their kind of winter scents in, I just ran, and a few of my favourites so far, they've got cinnamon latte, which I really like, but also nutmeg spice has been really beautiful, and some of the more traditional ones, like I think this is evergreen, like for the pine I'll keep, and also the Christmas star I really like, I'll obviously keep to Christmas, and Winter Night was also really nice and woody and warming, but as soon as they had their kind of winter collection, I needed to stock up because I will just, I mean literally burn through them, but I love having my different parts of my house smell like different things. I like when people, the biggest compliment anyone can give me is coming to my house and saying that it smells nice. They'll make my entire life. And my house already smells nice just by having all these lovely things in. Before I end this video, I also just want to show you my new candle holder. I got this from the Antique Centre in York. I really love candlestick holders. I feel like these have an actual name. I just think of like Florence Nightingale whenever I see them, kind of the lady with the lamp kind of thing. But I do a lot by candlelight. I love reading by candlelight. I shower by candlelight because I just find it way more relaxing. I'm a person, I refuse to have the big light on at any time, and so I love like candlelight. And also you'll be so surprised by how much light candles actually give off as well. And so I bought this and I've literally been walking around the house with it, not lit necessarily, but just because I think it's really lovely. But yeah, I love a bit of 19th century brass. over here. So that is what I'm going to be reading and smelling this autumn. Please let me know if there are any books that you're looking forward to reading. And yeah, please let me know what the weather is like where you are. And if you don't want to do that and just want to say hi, please feel free to leave me some little autumnal leaves as an emoji. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.